Hey everyone, I'm your host, Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on a show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the Conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. You could also always email me at peter@historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, long before America's Civil War, or its manifest destiny for that matter, before it had ever flexed imperial muscle in the Pacific or landed troops on the beaches of Normandy, the fledgling United States found itself locked in a little-remembered, yet pivotal conflict thousands of miles from its shores. A naval war against pirates, monarchs, and extortionists. It was a struggle that would define the nation's earliest foreign policy, test the Constitution's boundaries of war-making powers, and ultimately forge the United States Navy into a permanent institution. These were the Barbary Wars, and they were America's first fight on the global stage. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The story of the Barbary War begins not with sabers drawn, but with ships that were hijacked. In the late 18th century, the Mediterranean Sea was ruled in part by fear of the Barbary corsairs, pirates operating with government approval out of the North African states of Tripoli, Tunis, Algiers, and Morocco. Collectively known as Barbary states, these Ottoman-backed principalities demanded tribute from merchant vessels to allow safe passage through their waters. Nations that paid were given licenses. Those that didn't saw their ships seized, cargo plundered, and crews enslaved. For centuries, European powers had given in to the Barbary rulers with bribes, naval gifts, and annual payments. Even the mighty British Empire had negotiated with them. But when the United States won its independence from Britain in 1783, it lost the protection of the Royal Navy, and thus immediately became a ripe target. American merchant ships sailing under their own American flag for the first time were unguarded and vulnerable. In 1785, 2 American ships were captured by Algerian corsairs, and their crews were enslaved, held for ransom in North African prisons. The U.S., without a navy, could do very little. Desperate, Congress appropriated funds to pay a tribute. By 1797, the United States was shelling out over $1 million annually, or a full 20% of the federal budget, just to appease the Barbary states. But these payments didn't buy peace, they brought dependency. Emboldened by success, the leaders of the pirates demanded more. Tripoli, led by the ambitious Yusuf Karamanli, declared war on the United States in 1801 after President Thomas Jefferson refused to raise the tribute. It was a bold gamble. The United States had a fledgling navy, no standing army, and minimal overseas experience. Yet Jefferson chose to fight instead of paying bribes. Thus began the First Barbary War, which lasted from 1801 till 1805, America's first declared war overseas under the new Constitution. Jefferson dispatched a small fleet of frigates to the Mediterranean. Among them was the now legendary, but at the time fairly new, USS Constitution, old Ironsides, which would go on to become a national symbol, and which you could still see and board in Boston Harbor today. The mission was both military and diplomatic: protect American commerce, pressure the Barbary rulers, and demonstrate that the United States would not be bullied. The early campaigns were erratic. American ships blockaded Tripoli's harbor and engaged in sporadic bombardments. In 1803, disaster struck. The USS Philadelphia, under Captain William Bainbridge, ran aground near Tripoli and was captured intact by the enemy forces. Its entire crew of 307 men was taken prisoner, and the ship was refloated and anchored in Tripoli's harbor as a prize. What happened next became a legend. In February of 1804, Lieutenant Stephen Decatur, just 25 years old, led a daring nighttime raid into Tripoli's harbor aboard a disguised ketch. With a hand-picked crew, he boarded the Philadelphia, killed or captured its guards, and set the ship ablaze, denying it to the enemy. British Admiral Lord Nelson is said to have called it the most bold and daring act of the age. Decatur returned home a hero, catapulting the U.S. Navy's reputation across the globe. Yet the war dragged on. With naval blockades unable to decisively end the conflict, Jefferson authorized a more unorthodox approach. In 1805, United States Marines, yes, the ones of the To the Shores of Tripoli fame, and now you know, joined with a disaffected Caramanli's brother, Hammett, to stage a land assault on Tripoli from the east. Led by William Eaton, the small force of Marines, mercenaries, and Arab allies marched 500 miles across the Libyan desert and captured the coastal town of Derna, making the first time that the U.S. flag was raised in victory on foreign soil. Though the military victory was modest, the psychological impact was massive. Faced with growing pressure on land and sea, Yusuf Karamanli agreed to negotiate. In June 1805, a peace treaty was signed. The United States agreed to pay a one-time ransom for prisoners, but ended all annual tributes and bribes. The First Barbary War was over, but not forgotten. The legacy was mixed. While Jefferson's use of force was popular, he had sidestepped formal congressional declarations of war, setting a precedent for future executive military action. The victory also highlighted America's naval limitations and inspired continued investment in warships and naval infrastructure. Yet the peace proved temporary. The Barbary rulers had not been decisively defeated, only delayed, you might say. In 1812, the United States became distracted by a far more existential conflict, the War of 1812, of course, against Britain. As American naval forces turned westward, the Barbary pirates sensed an opportunity. Once again, Algiers began seizing U.S. ships and enslaving crews. This time, however, the United States responded with overwhelming force. With the War of 1812 ended and the Navy battle-hardened, President James Madison authorized what became the Second Barbary War in 1815. Commanding this new campaign was Commodore Stephen Decatur, now a seasoned hero. He led a powerful squadron of 10 warships directly into the Mediterranean. Decatur moved with stunning speed and decisiveness. He captured 2 Algerian warships, forced his way into Algiers harbor, and delivered an ultimatum to Dey Omar Aga. The terms were clear: release all American captives, seize demands for tribute, and sign a treaty under threat of annihilation. The Dey complied. Similar treaties were forced upon Tunis and Tripoli, effectively ending the Barbary threat. The war lasted mere weeks, but its impact was lasting. The Second Barbary War cemented the U.S. Navy as a serious international force and ended centuries of piracy-backed extortion in the Mediterranean. It marked the first time an American naval squadron had imposed peace terms on foreign governments halfway around the world. For the first time, the United States was not a petitioner on the global stage, but an enforcer. Yet the wars also left contradictions. The United States had fought against state-sponsored piracy, while itself expanding westward through conquest. The moral clarity of resisting extortion on the seas existed alongside the nation's own complicity in slavery and territorial aggression. Moreover, the Barbary Wars opened questions still debated today. How far should America go to protect its citizens abroad? When can force be used without a formal declaration of war? What is the price of peace, and who pays it? Despite their foundational role in shaping early American identity, the Barbary Wars faded from popular memory. They were eclipsed by the grandeur of the Civil War, the romanticism of the frontier, and the scale of later world wars. Yet traces remain. In the opening lines of the Marines' hymn, for instance, in the legacy of naval heroes, and in the ethos of American resolve that we will not negotiate with pirates. Thanks for listening. This week on the Conversation series, Dr. Moody Al-Rashid, a distinguished historian and author whose work takes us back to the very foundations of human civilization.
So the story kind of begins with a woman called Enigaldinana. It's the only name we know her by, which is the name she was given when she was consecrated as a high priestess to the moon god in Ur by her father, who was the last independent Babylonian king, Nabonidus. And when excavators found her palace, they discovered on the kind of top layer of excavation a weird collection of artifacts that are from much earlier eras. Some of them, almost 2,000 years early. They found a votive object, so an object with a dedication to a god from around 1800 BCE. They found just such a bizarre collection of things that were out of times. And it was this weirdly shaped cuneiform tablets. And on it talks about the discovery of a brick by a governor of Ur. And the governor took the brick that he found and put it in the palace for display. And so early excavators thought, oh my goodness, we have found the world's first museum.